It can be overwhelming. I've just had to learn how to pause and pivot and really portion out my energy and then save something for myself.
Welcome to Sports Mom Rapport, where we support and connect with moms of athletes while sharing helpful advice along the way. This is Tara.
And I'm Destiny. Thank you for joining us as we highlight you incredible moms.
Please welcome today's guest, Channon Washington. Channon is a super caring, busy, accomplished, and devoted mom and wife. This amazing mom recently earned her EDD from Vanderbilt University while keeping up with her family's demanding schedules. Furthermore, she is the new director of culturally responsive instruction, equity, and inclusion for an entire school district in Southeast Michigan. Both Channon and her husband are quite athletic, and I've seen Channon keep up with the best in a recent ballroom dancing competition. Aside from her own admirable profession, she is a loyal supporter of her husband's coaching career and a big cheerleader at her daughter and son's year-round games and meets. We're so excited to hear your story, Channon. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara, and thank you, Destiny, for thinking that I have a story worth sharing.
Absolutely. Channon, please share with us your upbringing and what types of activities and hobbies interested you.
I can't really talk about my upbringing without talking about my parents. It's very much so like a tragic love story with those two. They met when they were 14. My mom comes from more of an upper middle class neighborhood, and my dad lived in a lower economic neighborhood, and she would go over to his street to visit her cousins. And that's how they met, and they kind of all grew up together. My mom was really smart. She got a full ride to university, and my dad went to the same university, but they were so in love, they dropped out, and that caused a lot of tension. So not only was my mom marrying someone from the wrong side of the tracks, but then she dropped out of college, but they got married. 2 years later, they had me. The first half of my childhood was just perfect. My parents became Christians when I was about 2. And so we had this really close-knit church family that we spent a lot of time with. My dad always played music, and before he became a Christian, he gigged in, R&B bands and local bands and nightclubs and stuff like that for his night job. And when he became a Christian, he was a part of actually 2 local gospel bands. And so I was always around music. All of the people in the band and their families were always around. And it was just a fun childhood. And then, my parents kept bringing home a new baby girl every 2 years and then boys. But so I grew up in a really good situation, had both sets of grandparents. Life was really good. And then when my dad's mother died, this is for me where I noticed a big shift in our life. My mother may have a different story, but my childhood changed drastically when my dad's mother died because he became really different. And what I can now name was he struggled with grief and depression, and it led him to substance abuse. And that ended up kind of yanking our family from this comfortable middle-class life into the dregs of poverty. Eventually, my parents would have to separate because we lost our home, and we were effectively homeless for 2 years. I think I was in 7th and 8th grade when my dad left to live with one set of relatives, and then me and my mom and my siblings went to live with another set of relatives, which is not only legally homeless, but, so my family was split apart. And the struggle in that, before we lost our home, we were really, really in a very dark, impoverished place. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have a car. We had to wait in line for food. It was really difficult. And I remember the one thing that was constant and consistent in my life in the good times and the bad times was we were always around music. And though I never learned to play an instrument, music became just a real important part of my life. But I don't really remember having hobbies until high school. We didn't have any money for me to do extracurriculars. But when I got into high school, my mom was always very diligent about keeping me challenged academically. And so I was always in an honors class. And then when it came time for high school, she had me test to go into Detroit Renaissance High School, which is for the gifted and talented. And you have to test into the 90th percentile in order to get accepted. And it is all college prep from there. And when they send you the acceptance packet, they send you a list of electives and they're all in the fine arts. But you have to either play an instrument or be able to sing. And then there was dance. So you didn't need any experience to dance. And I chose dance. That teacher was amazing because in 4 years, I became good enough at dance, just taking it in a public high school setting, to where I got accepted to the BA program at Western Michigan University, and I got my degree in dance. I was never a great dancer, but I was able to really immerse myself, challenge myself, and I had a huge impact on the department in other areas, in theory and in history and in technique. I was named the Presidential Scholar of Dance when it was time for me to graduate. I guess dance became more of a hobby. It became more of part of my way of expressing myself. My upbringing was full of some challenges that my kids will never experience. I think that in and of itself has built some resilience and perspective. It also speaks to maybe even my appreciation for being in the United States, for our government. We relied a lot on the government for paying our bills, feeding us, for educating, and also the teachers. A public school teacher who got me from point A to college degree in dance, just all in a public school setting. So I became really thankful and aware of how important those things are. And though my dad passed away, I had years with him when he was healthy and sober. He really had a huge impact on imparting his Christian beliefs on to us. But also I was able as an adult to name depression and to name substance abuse as a disease and to see that he was not healthy. Was able to walk in a place of forgiveness and come to peace with that experience. It has made me who I am today. I'm not saying I'm glad I went through it. I'm saying I am who I am because of it. Because of it, I was able to really focus on giving my kids a great experience as children, to be very intentional about keeping them safe and fed and in a home. So that's my upbringing.
That is such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it and opening up to us.
Yes, thank you.
I can tell it's really brought you to be such an appreciative and caring and devoted person. It explains your teaching background. It explains your humility and just thankfulness. That's just beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you so much, Channon. Could you introduce us to your family, your immediate family, your husband, your son, your daughter? Tell us a little bit about their interests and the paths that they've taken thus far.
Sure. So I will start with youngest to oldest. My son, Caleb, is 14. He is a freshman in high school. Right now, he is trying 3 sports that he's been playing now for the last year-round: football in the fall, basketball through the winter, and then track through the spring and summer, and then basketball in the summer. Caleb is my more sensitive child. He's more in tune to people in general. He's incredibly friendly. He's fearless in social situations. He really wants to be a great athlete, and finding that path for him has been very different from his sister. And so we are making sure that we're keeping his experience unique to him. He is definitely on a journey with his relationship with God right now, which is very cool for me to watch, because I've been very diligent about teaching and sharing my beliefs with my kids. But then when they get to be a certain age, allowing them the freedom to make their own choice, which is very different from how I grew up. Watching him on his personal journey is kind of cool. He is kind of a ladies' man, and that has been a problem. Helping him navigate that, and we're in the thick of it. So that's Caleb. He is friendly, outgoing, very adaptable. And then my daughter, Sydney, is very different from Caleb. Personality-wise, she is much more reserved in social situations. She is 19 years old. She's a sophomore at the University of Pittsburgh. She is so much smarter than me or her dad ever were or ever will be academically. The girl is an academic machine. She astonishes me with how she's achieved academically already in her life. I noticed maybe when she was, I don't know, but before she could walk, she was so physically gifted. with her strength. She could climb. She climbed up 6 shelves in a linen closet, and I turned my back. Before I knew it, she was at the top shelf. And I was like, you are going into gymnastics like that. Freakishly gifted. She could jump, run. She was so... And right now she's really, really thirsty for Black culture, which I, admit she's been somewhat deprived of compared to how I grew up in a predominantly Black city, predominantly Black schools. Most of my teachers were Black. Most of my friends were Black. My family can be a little multiracial depending on which part of the family we're in. But for the most part, my family kind of lives in Black culture. Even the white and Japanese parts of my family are very much so immersed in Black culture, whereas Sydney is kind of replenishing everything that she didn't get kind of growing up in the suburbs where she grew up. And she is pre-med. She's an award-winning gymnast at the University of Pittsburgh in her first year. She's pushing herself beyond what I've never pushed her the way that she pushes herself, but she is not socially fearless yet. Like, she's getting there. She's starting to get out of her shell. And she's also on an interesting journey with her relationship with God. Like, she'll send me pictures of her at a party one night, and the next night she'll send me a picture on my way to Bible study. I'm like, okay, just like, keep doing both until one of them is no more fun. So that's Sydney. She is super smart. She's learning how to show more emotion. I think being a high level athlete has kind of made her a bit of a stone cold killer in some situations where I need her to be more like a nurse. And then my husband and I were raised in 2 completely different worlds. And so we could not be more opposite. It blows our minds every day. He and I, we look alike. We seem to get along really well, but the way that we were raised so differently and the way we see the world is so different. We're just now coming to the place where we can just admit that and be comfortable with it. My husband grew up in East Lansing, and both of his parents graduated from Michigan State and then kind of stayed there. He played, I think, 4 or 5 sports year round. So he was definitely raised in an athletics culture. Unlike me, my husband didn't grow up in a family of faith at all. Which is relatively rare in the Black community. And that's not a judgment on them, but that just explains how different our upbringing was, where as a child, I think we were at church or church events at least 3 or 4 nights a week. And my husband didn't grow up going to church at all. So there are differences there. But one of the things that's really special about his family is that, particularly in the Black community, to have a father in the home who is the head of the household, and to have 3 sons who complete high school and go to college and get their degrees. That's also, they're the most educated Black family that I know, to have 5 people in one family with a bachelor's degree. That's not the case in my family at all. They are really special in that sense. And education was really important. Accelerating in sports was really important. But what's fascinating is that my husband doesn't really have any other interest, because he really, really is passionate about athletics, particularly basketball. And in working that hard as a kid and as a teenager, there just really wasn't room to explore other things. And so, coming into my life, now he, likes to go to musicals or, go see a Broadway show or go to a play or go to the museum. Those are things he didn't really do much growing up. And so, we do those things. I think the thing that he loves the most is coming home, laying on the couch with me and just vegging out. That is his number one. He likes to play golf occasionally. We love to travel, but doing nothing with me, with no plan, with snacks, that's probably the highlight of his that's his hobby. So
his hobby, his comfort. That's great that you're there for him.
When we dated, we met in college. We broke up after dating for 2 years. And in that breakup, I think we both kind of came to the realization that, the other one was the one, but we didn't necessarily know a path back to each other. And he actually just started going to church. It had nothing to do with me, really. He decided to become a Christian. We were not together. And it was really cool to watch him go on that journey. And then when we decided to get married, we decided we wanted to live a Christian lifestyle together. And that's how we wanted to raise our kids. we're so different. And sometimes I look at my kids, I'm like, how did y'all come from us? Like,
I can relate to so much of that. And then obviously also both we have husbands that love athletics and are college coaches. So gosh, Shannon, I didn't know how much I would just have in common with you. It's just beautiful, but also the irony there and just listening to how different our families can all be, but the beauty in coming together and just being one family unit. I just love to hear that. So thank you for sharing. So obviously your husband is now coaching at the University of Michigan. He's been there roughly 6 years, took that position. How did that move affect your family? And how did you overcome any challenges that may have arose?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've been pretty transparent with anybody who asks that I was not a willing participant in being a coach's wife. I told my husband after the first year, I was just like, yeah, no, I can't do this. Like, this is not, I did not sign up. Like when I screened him very thoroughly before I married him, and I asked all the right questions. This is like 20-year-old me. I said, I do not want to marry a teacher, a firefighter, a soldier, a doctor, or a police officer. And I said, do you know why? And he goes, no, because they all work crazy hours and they're never home. I don't want that like transient traveling, working weird hours lifestyle. And he's like, oh, okay. So,
You forgot one thing in there.
I guess I wasn't specific enough. But when he decided to become a coach after the first year, I had just had a baby. And after the first year, I told him, I was like, I can't do this. And I don't want to do it. So I can't. And I don't want to. Mm-hmm. And I think he thought I was just being very like postpartum whiny. Because he was just like, oh, okay, it'll get easier. And I was like, actually, it may not. It may not get easier. I realized that he was not going to walk away from this. Some of it was he never really had a chance to explore anything else in his identity ever. Like as a kid, as a young adult, being a college athlete, part of what happens is you do lose some of your individual identity, that piece of you that goes to university to discover who you are. College athletes don't always have that experience because they are issued an identity. They're issued clothing. They're issued a theme song. They're issued a schedule. They are given a set of values. They're issued all of these things, and they don't always get to go on the journey I went through as an artist and an activist and all of the things that I got to explore because I was not representing the university. And so I understood that he really just didn't have another way to look at who he could be. And he's really good at what he does, it turns out. So we struggled to figure out how to adapt. And my commitment was to keep trying every year, just start over like every year. And there were 3 points in the year that I would focus on getting to. The first one was Christmas break. If I can make it to Christmas break, I'll be fine. And then the second one was the Final Four weekend, which was always just me and him for 4 or 5 days in a row, just walking around, eating, looking at each other, doing nothing. We would always go to Final Four weekend. If I can make it to Final Four weekend, and then if I can make it to August 1st, which was the end of the recruiting season where he was gone all July, we always went on vacation together alone August 1st. If I could make it to Christmas, Final Four weekend, and August 1st, I could keep going. I would keep going to the Lord and say, Lord, if this is your idea, if this is the path I'm supposed to be on, keep showing me how to leap to the next thing, how to get to the next thing, how to get through the next thing. There was never a day where I woke up and was like, I really want to do this coach's wife thing. Never. It was more of, I want us to stay together as a family and I want my kids to have a good life. And I love my husband, so I'm going to do this. When we moved here, the thing that I think gave him a great deal of satisfaction was I no longer needed to work full time. I didn't need to work full time financially. So that helped because it took something off of my plate. But coming here at this level, there was like a whole different type of energy that was required as a coach's wife. So I had like more responsibility to kind of represent the program and to be very outward facing with folks in the community. Like this is a very high profile situation compared to where we came from. And so I adapted to that. I found a couple of good friends who I felt like I could confide in. Then I needed to learn how to control my emotions around wins and losses. And that did not always go well. So I love to tell the story about our first year when my husband got a technical foul and we lost the game by 2. I actually went to the hospital because my heart would not slow down. I panicked because I was like, we're going to get fired. You caused us to lose a game. This is Michigan, the technical. I couldn't slow my heart down. My blood pressure was like, it was in the 200. And I kept looking at him like, I told you I couldn't do this. We didn't get fired. It wasn't anything like that. But, I had just also given up my whole career. I worked my way to the top of the pay scale as a teacher, which for most people doesn't sound like much, but like that's your whole goal is get to the top of the pay scale, get really good at what you do. And then, it kind of like is smooth sailing to retirement from there. So I walked away from all of that. And then I realized he's really good at his job. There was a lot I needed to learn about him as a coach that I didn't appreciate before because I was so busy being a mom and a teacher and a wife. So I don't have those anxieties anymore. Moving here for me, I learned to just kind of put my trust in God and not worry about the wins and losses and know that my husband is good at what he does. So that was helpful. My kids, Caleb was an easy adjustment. There's like no story there. I think the hardest thing for him is the expectation that he has to be a great basketball player. He is a good basketball player. He's not going to be recruited by my husband to play here. And that's like a hard truth maybe for him, but he is really working on his identity outside of basketball. And so I'm happy with that. Sydney, I spent 24 hours straight in the bed moaning about Sydney when we moved here, because when we moved here, she quit gymnastics. It had nothing to do with anything here. It had to do with leaving the only coaches she ever knew and not knowing anything else about how to train. But once she built some trust with the new coaches, they built a bridge for her to make that transition. But the transition was rough. As a family, I think we thrived here once she found a home at the new gym. My husband started winning once the team started winning, which was really good. And once I realized that I still just need to make it to Christmas, make it through March Madness, make it to the Final Four, make it to vacation. And that is literally still how I get through each year. I think everyone can find something to complain about, but it's really been a blessing. All of the adversity we've gone through, from plane crashes to losing the Final Four to a coaching change that came out of nowhere. We have really just enjoyed God's mercy.
I just love to hear that, because what I heard in that answer was evolution. I heard evolution in your children and their growth. I heard evolution in your marriage, in your faith, with putting the anxieties to side, not so much about wins and losses, but just more focusing on the family. Yeah. And so I love to hear that as a fellow coach's wife who has been in 5 states, been through coaching changes, been through firings, been through blissful hirings. It has been such a journey for me as well. I feel you. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it can be applicable to so many sports moms, specifically as you're balancing putting your marriage first, putting your children first, sometimes putting your professional career to the side. I just think that was so beautifully answered. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I have so much respect for you both. You both have completely rose to all these challenges of being a coach's wife. Channon, I love hearing all the sacrifices that you've made to keep your family together and the respect that you have for each of them. It's just beautiful. The small goals, what a great idea. Rewarding yourself little bits along the way, because rather than the big picture can just get so overwhelming.
Yes.
The small goals, you've really overcome a lot of adversity and have such a great insight into your family and others. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So, being that you went to the hospital with high blood pressure and you've got this daughter in collegiate gymnastics and your son's a multi-sport athlete and your husband's the NCAA coach, I've seen you watching more than one competition or game simultaneously. Some of those events overlap. So how do you hold yourself together?
I have to prioritize where I'm going to expend the energy. Basically, I have to make a decision. the emotional energy is going to go like towards Sydney, and I'm just going to keep an eye on this score, but I'm not going to like go up and down with this team today. Or if we're like, there's a couple of weekends last season where Michigan was having a big game. It was the Wisconsin game. And then I was in Pittsburgh at a gymnastics meet, and that's where there was the fight at the game, getting all these text messages and, like screen recordings. Sydney was about to get on the balance beam. I had to like turn my phone over. I knew what happened, but I had to say all my energy right now needs to go toward her getting a good score on balance beam. And the rest of it, I'm going to come back to, because I have to teach myself. All of my family stuff runs through me. Every time my son is playing basketball and someone passes him the ball, I feel that. When Sydney gets on beam, I feel that. When the kids that my husband, his position, the position that he coaches, the wings, when they are messing up, I feel it all flows through me. And I had to learn how to like turn off a couple of those levers. I can't have basketball and gymnastics flowing through me at the same time. I won't survive that. So I have had to just really prioritize. So my family, they don't understand how all of their stuff flows through me, because Sydney and Saudi are really expert at compartmentalizing things. I am not. I've had to learn how to like, okay, I'm going to put my phone down for a minute. Let me watch her do bars. Okay, good. Stuck the landing, 9875. That's good. All right. Now what's the score here? Okay. That's like, I've had to learn how to like pause and pivot. With Caleb, for me, it's more, I just want him to experience success. For him, that's not always found in a team win. What I've learned is that he feels really good about himself if he does well in the game, whether the team loses or wins. And that's very different from his sister and his father. So I have learned that our car rides home or our like lunches after games, if he made like 4 out of 5 of his baskets and the team lost by 20, he is as happy as if they won. I learned that because I turned off the other two to focus on him in that moment. It can be overwhelming. I've just had to learn how to like pause and pivot and really portion out my energy and then save something for myself. One of the things that I've started doing is every time I'm in a hotel, I have to work out every day. That releases a lot of the nervous energy, even if it's just like yoga or if it's on the elliptical or whatever. The other thing is I also get to eat whatever I want. That's how I'm taking care of myself in those. And Pittsburgh has a lot of really great restaurants, and I have a list I want to go. So I always tell Sid, doesn't matter what happens at this meet, we are going to eat good after. So
yes, I'm traveling with you next time. I like that.
Those are great ways of self-care. I love how you've been able to compartmentalize and read into what's really important and prioritize who needs what and be sure to give it to them at that time. Very impressive, Channon.
Oh, it's come with trial and error, though. I had to spend a night in the hospital first to learn.
Oh.
I can't go to the cardiac unit after every game.
Exactly. I love that. I'm curious, with Caleb being a multi-sport athlete, I know nowadays many sports and coaches specifically will encourage athletes to specialize. How has that been for Caleb to be still a multi-sport athlete at the high school level? And have you had kickback from coaches or feedback or any questionings on that philosophy?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because his best friend is a one sport athlete and they're not really competitive against each other in the one sport they play in common. Caleb doesn't have the obsession with one sport that his sister did or that some other kids either take on from their parents. He never took on that obsession with one sport. And when he had the opportunity coming out of COVID to play football, he wanted to play football. And I was just so glad to have him outside and doing that. And then when he had the opportunity to run track, I was all for that because I knew that he had some talent there that could be tapped into. And I also knew that he simply does not have the obsession with one sport to do what it would take to get him to an elite level in one sport. So you might as well enjoy the journey. And high school, particularly the high schools in the Saline, Ann Arbor area, have good sports, really competitive. He will have a great experience, great coaches. High school coaches are so much more about coaching the person than coaching the sport. versus the AAU world where he's been with basketball, which is all about who's the best and who's going to win. So I kind of gave in to what I thought my son needed as a person, not as an athlete. As an athlete, he probably should not be running the 400 while he's trying to put on weight for football. Those two things against each other, right? But he feels free and he can win the 400. Why wouldn't I let him do that? He feels so free when he runs, and he doesn't feel that level of freedom when he plays basketball. And he's probably never going to be big enough to really play football the way some of his peers put on pounds. Like, he just doesn't put on pounds. He's tall and he's muscular, but so why not let him just do it all? And ultimately, I really want him to have a good 4 years of sports, then transition into university. And if he wants to try to play at the university level, that's fine. But I also think he would really thrive at an HBCU. That's really where we want him to go. That's where I want him to go. Sports does not have to be his pathway. And I've been really trying to plug that. I know this is what your dad did and your uncles and your grandfather and your sister, but there's so many other pathways to higher learning. You don't have to play a sport. I want a whole happy person. I don't care about the sports conflicting with each other training wise. If Caleb needs that for his identity, to feel complete and to feel free and have some ownership. Having a dad who's a basketball coach, he really needs to have ownership in some things that his dad knows nothing about. So I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And I just feel like he's happy, feels complete.
You know, what I'm hearing in that answer too, is that it could have been challenging for you to hold your ground and say, you know what, I'm thinking of Caleb as the person, not the athlete. But what I'm thinking about also is that right now, just with the mental health of our adolescents and just the simple fact that they have so much coming at them from so many different angles, whether it's in athletics, academics, social. I love that you're preserving his mental health and that you came to that conclusion. Is there any other thoughts that you have just on that?
I'm trying to. I don't remember growing up with adults really having their finger on the pulse of mental health the way that we're trying to now, particularly in the community that I came from. You were really just expected to be mentally tough, period. Happiness was really not necessary. It was more like survival, right? Or just being fulfilled was not really a priority when you're trying to put food on the table. I think with both of my kids, I had to step back and realize just how different they were and really focus on giving them what they needed, not just what was available or what everybody else was doing or what was easy. Particularly as a young man, I think it's so important for him to have a true sense of self, because otherwise the world will just keep telling him who he is. I want him to walk away from these years with us feeling like he had some say. And some of that is from the feedback I got from Sydney, where she wants to tell a story that she really wanted to do other sports. I'm telling you, every time I tried to give her a chance to do another sport, she refused. But she regrets not doing other sports. And I knew that she had Division I level talent when she was in the 7th grade. With Caleb, he hasn't shown us that yet. And it's not just talent, it's work ethic and commitment. And so because of that, I want him to, explore and try different things and cross-train and be around different people, because at the end of the day, you will walk away with a rich experience that you can translate into so many other things, not just one sport. There's a lot more to the multi-sport thing than just the sports. It's having to deal with different coaches and different rules and different teammates. All of that is going to help him become a more complete social, emotional person. And it'll translate into other things, not just a higher level of the sport. It's all a hypothesis, though. I don't know.
The jury's out.
We'll see. We can redo this in 10 years and see so how'd that go? I don't know.
Yeah. Speaking of, Tara and I both have gymnasts, right? Yeah. So we can relate to you when it comes to Sydney's journey and the Division I path, because all of our daughters now will be Division I college gymnasts. Yay. But it's interesting because that path does look so different from other sports and from athletes that choose to be multi-sport athletes. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because it is a different perspective and even philosophy, but no less important. I
feel the pressure that parents feel, particularly in communities like this one. There are some parents who the only way out is with the sports scholarship. And I'm just no, kids should be able to play sports for fun. There's intramural sports, there's club sports. Like, you don't have to compete at this level to be validated as an athlete. But I'm in the minority on that. Like, our culture has gone haywire with believing that we got to put our kids in something when they're 4, and then they have to play it until they're 18, and then they sign a letter of intent. That's the line.
Agreed. Absolutely crazy. And it's just so admirable that you're so in tune with your children's mental health and exposing them to different sports, different activities, and letting them lead their own journey. They're really learning a lot of great life lessons. And
I hope so.
Oh, you're doing
lucky
amazing.
to have you.
Amazing job. Absolutely amazing. So you've told us so many interesting things about your family and how you all got to where you did. We'd like to focus on you at the moment and hear about your professional background. I know you mentioned you were a teacher. I know that you recently got an EDD, which is a PhD in the College of Education. What motivated you to go back to school to pursue this advanced degree? What are your hopes in the coming years related to your profession? And tell me about some challenges. I'm sure there were some challenges that you encountered while in school with your family life as well.
There are some days where I wake up and I'm just like, I can't believe I put myself through that. Like, of all the things, why did you do that? In undergrad, I got 2 bachelor's degrees, one in dance and one in history education. And then I got my master's in education. My original plan was I was going to be a teacher for a few years, and then I really wanted to go to law school. And one night I was at my best friend's house and we were planning a couple's trip. And my best friends, people I went to school with, we all went to a high school for nerds. And I just threw out there, you guys, we should go to law school at night and on the weekends. That's kind of weird to say, like, at a social gathering, but to my circle of people, that was a really intriguing idea. So my best friend was just like, I don't know about that. And she just kind of I said, well, let me know what you think about it, because we could do it together. And I was kind of being lighthearted, but I always wanted to go to law school. I knew that I was to be a teacher, but I think one of the people that I look at as a role model is Dennis Archer. He was the mayor of Detroit, and he started off as a teacher. Then he became a lawyer. Then he became a judge. Then he became mayor. And I said, I could do that, except I don't want to be mayor. I'll just stop at being a judge. And that was really kind of my way to give back to society. Start in public schools and then become a defense attorney or a prosecutor and then become a judge. That's what I thought. But because of the path my husband's career took, I started to question whether or not law school was a good idea. I didn't know if I could be a good mother and a lawyer at the same time. And so much of the parenting was going to fall on me. But as my kids got older, I thought I can go to law school at night and then on the weekends, and I could still do this now that they're older. So when I proposed it to my friend, a year later, she calls me and she goes, do you want to go to law school together? And she had been a stay-at-home mom for 12 years. And I said, are you serious? That was a year ago. And she goes, yeah, I'm serious. I didn't get that release in my soul to do it. I kept hitting this I don't know if this is for you kind of feeling. And then a couple of weeks, I called her back and I said, I think I'm supposed to get my doctorate in education. I'm going to look into that. And at the time we had just moved, but I want you to go ahead and finish law school. I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. So she goes on the journey, takes the LSAT, gets into law school. Took her 5 years to get through. She has 3 kids. She graduated. Her husband's job moved. So they moved to the New York City area. She passed the bar, got a job. Now she's on her second job. She is living her best life. She's my kid's godmother, my best friend ever. And that's the path she took. Somewhere in there, I really felt compelled to go get my doctorate. I wanted to do it at Michigan. And so I looked into getting into the PhD program at Michigan. Well, right around that time, the head coach at the time was exploring taking a job in the NBA. And that scared me off, because Michigan's PhD program is very much so here in Ann Arbor. If my husband's boss leaves, then I won't be able to finish, and then I'll have to start over somewhere else, and that's going to be messy, and I don't want to do that. So I said, I need to find a program that's hybrid. I don't want to do just an online doctorate. I want to be a part of a high-level educational community in person that has an online element to it, so I can travel and I can do it from wherever. And Vanderbilt had just started their hybrid program that requires you to go to campus 3 to 4 times a year but also your classes and your cohort meets on Zoom. This is before the pandemic. All of your classes are taught live by a professor. And then you have these research experiences in person on campus. And so I would actually be a part of the Vanderbilt community, not just in cyberspace. So I decided this was the right fit. So I applied, I got in, and then I panicked and I deferred for a year. I panicked because of the cost. Vanderbilt is really expensive. And at the time, Sydney is at the peak of Gym America, flying all over the place. Caleb is doing soccer and basketball at the time. Those things cost money. And the employment situation here was still kind of like, is he staying? Is he going? What's happening? So I deferred for a year. So I took a year to save money and then jumped right into the program a year later. That first class almost did me in. And once I started being able to get into the research I wanted to do, even though it was hard and a lot, at least I knew what I was doing. So one of the things that Vanderbilt requires is you have to find an organization, find a problem they're having, help them solve the problem. That's how you find your dissertation project. And it has to be a real life organization with a real life problem. And it has to all be happening in real time. And so I chose Saline area schools. I chose the school system that I work in. I was very fortunate to have built good relationships there. At first, I wanted to do it because I believe that I had more to give to the profession of education. I think once I started it, I finished it because my kids were watching. There were several days where I was like, I don't need this. There was one day where I went to my husband and I said, listen, I know how much this program cost. What if after I graduate, I just decide I want to go back to doing nothing? And he goes, that's fine. Like, you've done enough. Like, thank you. So I got a note that said, you've been approved to graduate. It just all like started happening on its own after that, basically. So I did some interviews with the superintendent for my research. And in the middle of my interview, he said, will you come work for us? And I said, well, Vanderbilt has very strict rules. I can't work where I'm researching. I need to get approval from Vanderbilt. The department head wanted to know, well, what's the work? And when I told them Celine's story, their challenges with equity, particularly with racism and anti-LGBTQ issues, and how they really wanted to coach and develop their teachers to become more culturally responsive, which is what my dissertation was on. She said, I can't deprive them of you as a resource. So she approved for me to start working there. And then they offered me the part-time job to consult. And then they offered me a full-time job to continue that work. It literally started in my friend's living room, planning a couples trip to celebrate our 10-year anniversary, where I threw out, let's go back to law school. Let's go to law school at nights and weekends. We were all laughing like, oh, wouldn't that be funny? And that's how I ended up doing it. And then there was a moment where I wanted to walk away and I was like, nope, Sydney and Caleb are watching.
Well, congratulations to you for seeing it through. You really are a great role model for your children, for sure. And it's really cool that you planted the seed for your best friend to go to law school.
Mm-hmm.
That was never on her radar ever. And now she is a tax attorney for an accounting firm and she does international taxes. And when I tell you, like, her undergrad major was dance and French, I think. Like, she never thought that she would do that. And I was rooting for her every step of the way.
It's never too late and you're never too old. So Shannon, we have learned so much about you. I love it. Thank you for opening up your heart and your family to us. You've mentioned some of the ways that you keep calm and you treat yourself when you're at the games or at the meets. Are there any other ways that Shannon unwinds, re-energizes, and makes time for herself?
Thank you for asking that, because when I took the full-time job in Saline, knowing I wasn't just going to be working with teachers, but they also want me to do a lot of work with the community and with kids, probably like a lot of communities around America right now, our community is very divided and it can be really contentious right now, particularly around what's happening in school. And there were a few people in our district who did not want me to even be hired and didn't want this position to exist and still really question the value of of the work I do. And so I talked to some colleagues, and I've done some studying about people who do this kind of work in equity and inclusion and in social justice, and how important self-care is, and how important it is to know how to disconnect and unplug and where to recharge. And so I have been really intentional about doing things that I probably never needed to do as a classroom teacher. One of them is I listen to a lot of music. The theme of the music is around social justice. It can be pop. It can be, some really traditional, like what we would call like Negro spirituals. It can be some R&B, some soul music. I listen to music that really tells the story of justice in this country. And I do that while I'm working. It reminds me of all the people who came before me who did this kind of work in hostile environments. And it connects to the part of me that is very much so energized by music. The other thing I did when I graduated was I went and bought a stack of books that had nothing to do with school, basically. And they're all books that I've seen like over the last couple of years that I really wanted to read, but they didn't quite fit into what I was studying. And one of them I actually saw at the middle school library. I just saw the cover of it and it said Black Boy Joy. I was like, that looks like a really cool book. I don't have time to read it. And so it's a book written for 7th graders, but I went and got it to read it for myself. And so I have a couple of those books that I just have been wanting to get to the last 3 years, haven't been able to. And I've been making time on Saturdays and Sundays to put my feet up, turn on the fireplace, and just read for my own pleasure and my own personal learning, not for school. And then the last thing has been because my husband's the tempo of his job is a little different than even it was just a couple of years ago. And some of the things that I like to do, he can't do. And one of those is go to breakfast. I love to go to breakfast on Sunday mornings or go to brunch. When we first moved here, I had to learn how to do that stuff by myself. And it's not that I couldn't I could call someone and say, hey, do you want to go to lunch? Do you want to go to breakfast? But I actually needed to go by myself. And I learned that there's a huge part of me that is very introverted that really gets recharged and refreshed being alone. And it took me a while to be brave enough to go to the movies by myself, go to my favorite restaurant alone, and not worry about what people might be thinking. And now I really don't care because I love it. I love to go by myself. I'll go to the movies and take my favorite fuzzy socks and my favorite Starbucks drink and watch a movie that my husband would never want to watch with me. I do those kind of things to really give me something to look forward to and to nourish the part of my soul that can get depleted doing the work that I do. There is a such thing as battle fatigue in the work that I do. It's actually, Michigan State calls it racial battle fatigue, where you can get very traumatized by dealing with racism. I work really hard to make sure that I don't internalize that when I have to come across that. One of my favorite groups is called Sweet Honey in the Rock. It's an all-female a cappella group, and they sing some of the most beautiful traditional songs without instrumentation, all a cappella. And when I hear those voices, I feel energized. Those are just some of the ways that I've learned since I started working again.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, your work can definitely get really intense. Mm-hmm. And I love how it's just beautiful that music can give you such calm. And maybe that has to do something with your father, with his gigs, and just a happy place in remembering all the music.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I have a playlist of his favorite songs. He passed away in 2005, and I started curating and create all the playlists. I have a list of songs that he used to play when we were kids, that remind me of the good days. I listen to those at work too. Like I start my morning with music to remind myself that I'm not alone. There are people who did this before me, and there's joy in this work, even if it's not happy.
That's super special. And I can totally relate to the feelings and the joy that music can bring.
Mm-hmm.
Channon, we have so enjoyed listening to all these stories and you opening up to us. Thank you. I think we can all really learn from your stories, your experiences, and the terrific advice that you've been sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you for thinking that there's value in it. For me, it's just my crazy life. But thank you for giving me a chance to talk. I hope I wasn't too chatty. And I just appreciate that you all are reaching out to moms. Clearly, you both have that huge mom heart. Like Tara was the welcoming committee for us when we moved here. And, she didn't know all that Sydney was going through. She just like reached out and was like, hey, I have a daughter who's Sydney's age or whatever. And Lily and Sydney were inseparable for so many years. And I'm just very thankful for the path that Laval and Destiny laid here. Like we have a lot of common friends. And I think that's because we do have a lot in common, but you all were wonderful here and made it easy for us to step into this huge fish bowl. I'm very thankful that you all are going to send this good energy out into the world. And it's just not easy being a gym mom. So thank you both for inviting me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming. We would like to know, how can our listeners keep up with you? And then if you have any just closing remarks or advice to put a beautiful bow on this message, just any advice for other sports moms, and then how our listeners can keep up with you.
Sure. So I'm going to be really honest. My social media game is still pretty private. I do have a LinkedIn. And if people want to go to my LinkedIn, just search Channon Washington. Channon is spelled with a C. Advice. I think the best advice is there's no one or right way to do it all the time. With the kids, I had to really constantly recenter my values and be uncompromising in what I believed until I felt like they were in a place where they could make their own decisions. And so my advice to parents is, if there are values you want to impart to your kids, be relentless about that until you feel comfortable that they can make their own decisions, and then let them lead. If you have a faith, if you have a belief system, trust that you did the right thing, and you're not going to get it all right. So forgive yourself when you get it wrong.
Great advice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Channon. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the energy that you brought to the podcast and just the vulnerability and openness. I'm sure so many sports moms will benefit from hearing your word. And just thank you for opening your heart for us. We wish you the best of luck in your new career, with your family, and to your husband's coaching position at the University of Michigan. Thank you again.
Thank you both.
We're so glad you've joined us today. Thank you for listening. Upcoming episodes and show info can all be found at sportsmomrapport.com. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend. We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out to us with any comments, or if you or someone you know would like to share their story and connect with us.